Hey John, the team pushed a really good update to custom functions for Google Sheets yesterday, so I figured it'd be good for us to walk through it.
Hey, Mike. Yeah, it's really exciting. This update is going to give a ton of capability to custom functions.
Yeah, makes it a lot easier. Okay, what are we going to cover today? We're going to use an ACV function with some example SAS data, so that's a big use case, and we're going to discuss the topic of optional inputs. And optional inputs are mostly used for configuration. We'll go through that real quick. It's you'll see it's very good example of how easy these numbers functions can become valuable. And then we'll do a quick review of actually configuring that function as an array. That's really easy, but we'll walk you through it as an example. And then extra credit, we'll probably talk a little about the numbers canvas and how you should build inputs when you have optional values. Okay, let's jump right into it. And oops, we've created a sample sheet here. And what first thing for anyone who's not familiar with numbers functions, we've got one right here. Here's our add-on, and we're using a custom function called ACV, a calculation we're all really well familiar with. But the first thing you should notice here is this is the function equals numbers ACV, and then the inputs that you're using. And so we've got an array here of 4 rows. And there's no calculations, right? So all you're doing when you're using a numbers custom function is just mapping the inputs. Okay, where are all the calculations done? We'll come back and review this at the end, but this is the numbers visual canvas, and here's your same inputs that we just showed you. These last two are optional. Here's ACV being calculated, and here are all the calculations visually. So the complexity and the calculations are here in numbers, and then in the Google Sheet, you're just mapping the inputs. It makes it really easy. What's the enhancement we added to yesterday? And the enhancement is this ACV is taken in extended price, start date, end date. Those are required because you need those values to enter to calculate the ACV. But then an added enhancement to this calculation is the end date active or not? And what we mean by that is companies do have a choice of one of two things when they're doing their subscription dates. So 1/1 to 12/31, and this last day here on an annual contract is clearly active. But some companies will also do 1/1/25 to 1/1/26, and that's the day the contract terminates. So this function numbers ACV function accommodates either. And the way you set your configuration is in the fourth value here, end date is active. You can set a true or false, but notice the enhancement here is you just enter a single value. You don't have to have an array of true, true, true for every record. So that's the enhancement, and this is fantastic. Alternatively, you could leave it blank and just have an extra comma here, and then that would mean that the end date is active. It would be a false, and then it would calculate a different value for ACV. Okay, so let's again. So if we look at this here, you can see we're using the extended price, start date, end date. We're using true. We could change that real quick to empty, which effectively would be false in this per the logic. And you're going to see here the ACV is actually going to change. The second value we have in this function for optional values, and John, this one's a good one, right? Is ACV is valid. So we want one formula here, but a definite optional value that you may want is this even a skew that should where we should be calculating ACV? So you could put a logic in there if you're building the formula. We just have a true false. When is it false? John, you're used to these, right? So we don't want to calculate ACV on
Yep.
consulting
Right.
or pilots.
Consulting pilots. Exactly.
Yep. Yep. So in this case, you're going to have to figure out how I've seen like ARR there's just different ways that systems will output a column and give you a true false value for each record. So we're still on a single function, but we have an input here that will give you some added value. Should we be calculating ACV or not? And then we have the optional value, but of is the term last date active or it's not active. All right, so that's it on custom functions and the enhancement. Again, the enhancement is that we can have a static value here that gets repeated for every input, every record that comes through in the array. And let's do some extra credit, keep it short because this video's gone a little long. And here's our function that's doing the calculations. $12,000 extended price, start end date is 12/31. So in this case, it last end date is active. So you can see here again, if it was blank or false, you can see here we're calculating a different ACV. So that's assuming that you'd have a 1/1/26. So this is how the canvas works. All the calculations are done here. And you can copy this function from our catalog. The big comment I'd say here is where you are designing a function with optional values, you want to be very clear. So I would put the optional values at the end. So the order of these inputs are the order that the custom function takes in the spreadsheet. So you would put, in this case, ACV is valid at the end. And if it's blank, it gets calculated anyways, but if they put a false through, then it's not going to calculate. The second thing I'd say real quick is it is important to make sure you document your function descriptions properly. In this case, I'm saying end date is active and ACV is valid are optional values. So I think that's about it. If you have questions, hit us up on our Slack channel. We'll have the link in the video. Great stuff here on enhancement, array, and then a static value repeated as an array for every record. Makes things a lot simpler when you're using a numbers function in a spreadsheet.